Hi, this is Dr. Joshua Haney. I'm the saxophone professor at Oklahoma City University, and this weekend I served as a judge for OKMEA's second round All-State Band auditions. So I'm here to give you guys some information to take in mind when you are preparing for next year's auditions and learning how to distinguish yourselves from the pack and raise the quality of your audition. There were a lot of really strong players this weekend. However, there were a few ways that I noticed that you could really distinguish yourself from the mass of players around you. For context, in the second round, I was doing just tenor saxophones. We had 52 tenor saxophones alone, and when you listen to that many players, everyone can start to sound the same unless you do a few things to make yourself stand out to the judges. The first thing you really should do is make sure that you are taking advantage of things that are meant to be free points. Let's rack up the score. First thing is scales. By the time you get to All-State, you should not be worrying about whether or not you're going to play the scale correctly. And if you are worrying about that, it means you have not quite prioritized that enough in your private practice. As one of my teachers like to say, it's one of those pay now or really pay later type of deals. You really want to prioritize your scales so that there's no chance that you're going to make a note error or an unintentional mistake when they ask you to play the scales. Second, when you go to play the scales themselves, I see a lot of players play them very amusically, but as your band director will tell you, scales are the building blocks of music, and we should play them musically as a result. So I'm going to take E major, for example. That was one of the scales that was on the rotation. I hear a lot of players playing it like this. Sometimes we have a little bit of a mistake in there, and if you don't have a mistake, you hear how heavy it's being played with a really strong first note, and each note is very vertical, without a lot of sense of connection. There's also no dynamics, it's just kind of blasting. We want to avoid that. So here's how I'd recommend playing the scale if we're trying to be more musical and have a better sense of finesse and polish to our sound. You notice the first note did not have a pop or a slap or a jarring beginning of the note. It just was a natural release. I still had the tongue, but it wasn't a pingy tongue. It was just a legato release. And then the notes themselves are well connected while still being tongued. And I actually took the time to crescendo a little bit up the scale and then decrescendo down the scale. So it turns the scale, instead of being a simple musical exercise, it turns it into a musical gesture. And that helps elevate the whole rest of the audition. If I have a student coming in and they immediately play the scales musically, I know this student knows ball. The same thing is true for the chromatic scale portion, and that's hard because you have to start on low C. On tenor and alto, and even on baritone, that low C can be a little bit resistant. When we're playing that chromatic scale, we don't want to hear for that first note. It's very jarring, and it also makes it less confident that you'll be able to play those notes in the all-state ensemble with finesse and sensitivity. So here's what my chromatic scale would sound like. So notice I didn't slap on the low notes. I actually had the fingers set in advance of starting the note. There's no pop from the keys. Saxophone's not a percussion instrument. We want to avoid this sound when we're not trying to do it intentionally. I made sure to use my chromatic fingerings. So things like F to F sharp, you're going to want to use F and chromatic F sharp. And for the A to the A sharp, you're going to want to use the side fingering, no sliding with the first finger on bis. I crescendo to the top of the scale, and then I decrescendoed slightly to the bottom of the scale to turn it into a musical gesture. The most important thing is that I played 16th notes just like OKMEA asks for. However, you could hear every single note in the scale. There were no blurred notes, and I wasn't going so fast that the notes were indiscernible in just this vague up and down kind of gesture. You want to make sure you can hear taka 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 with every single note inside of the scale. So that's the next thing you can do to really elevate the scale portion. These are free points. That's almost a third of all of the scale, all the points that you can earn in the whole audition. So you really got to prioritize the scales. If you can do that, even if you make a mistake in the etudes, you can save your audition because you earned the free points that were given to you. Another place to really rack up the score is with the tone category. We heard a lot of really full sounds, and full sounds are the basis for a good sound. However, a full sound is not necessarily a refined sound. What we're going for is to have a concept where there is no extraneous buzz, no edge, no grit, no breathiness or airiness in the sound. You can have a full sound, but with all of these other kind of issues in the sound, it's not yet a good sound. So things that we can do to make sure that we can have a full sound that is also refined and is really going towards the ideal kind of classical tone, make sure you're using a good mouthpiece and reed. Now, reeds are the easier place to start. A Van Doren Blue Box 3 is a beautiful thing, or 3.5 if you're really a strong player. If you want something that's kind of between a Blue Box 3 or 3.5, a Van Doren V12 3 is kind of in between. It has a slightly different feel. All of those are really great choices. The D'Addario Reserve reeds are also good. I personally have a hard time playing them. They like to chirp on my mouthpiece, but if they work for you, can't go wrong with D'Addario Reserve in a 3 or a 3+ strength. When it comes to mouthpieces, I know I've said this a couple times on this channel, the Selmer S80 C-Star is a great starting place for most players. The Van Doren AL3 is a little bit more affordable, has a slightly more round sound, and also is a little bit softer in the dynamic ceiling that it can have. If you like the C-Star mouthpiece but want something that can take a little bit more air, the Selmer S90 190 is also very good. Or the 180 if you prefer to have a slightly smaller tip. Personally, I prefer the 190 because then I don't have to use as hard of a reed to really control the sound. I know it's difficult sometimes to afford mouthpieces, but this is a conversation you should have with your band director. There might be something in stock in your band supplies. Sometimes your band director can also know if there's someone that is selling their mouthpieces. Secondhand mouthpieces can be fine as long as they play okay. Also, take advantage of your resources. You have lots of good saxophone professors in this area, and we want to hook you up. So if you're needing a mouthpiece to elevate your audition, make sure you are seeking it out. When I have a student that comes into the audition and they have a refined tone quality that isn't just loud and full, but also refined and controlled, it really elevates all areas of the audition. It makes not only the tone category score go up, but it's going to elevate your scale category scores as well, and anything in the etude category. It's another opportunity to effectively run up the score, so take advantage of it. One area that I was kind of surprised to hear a little bit less of than expected this weekend was using vibrato. I think of vibrato as that last 5 to 10% of the score. If a student comes in with a beautiful sound and they're playing straight tone, they'll get a great score. But if you have all of that and then also a well-controlled vibrato that's being used appropriately in the music, that's going to get you that last 5 to 10% and really help you distinguish yourself. Finally, we have the etudes themselves. I could tell a lot of students really highly prioritized the etudes over sometimes the scales or other areas of the audition. And I actually want you to think about it the other way around. If you work on the fundamentals by having a really great tone quality, by having really great command of the scales, so that when you come to the etudes, they become much more of a natural extension of your prior learning. The etudes should not be an insurmountable peak that you are trying to work towards. If that's how it feels, it generally means that other areas of your fundamental technique are not quite ready. And that's okay. We're all students, we're learning, and we want to get you there. But if you focus on the fundamentals, it's going to make the etudes so much easier by comparison. Another thing that'll make the etudes easier is being careful about your tempo selection. Most people were playing the slow etude too slowly, and most people were playing the fast etude too quickly. So when you're hearing the fast etude, it should be quick. If it's allegro, it should not sound largo. However, allegro is a feeling. It's a range of tempos. Allegro does not mean 120 specifically. It means bright and fast. So, if you're not quite 120, that's totally fine. Play it at 110. Play it at 102, but clean. And it's going to make your audition sound not just more refined, but also tells the judge this is an intelligent student that knows where they're at and prioritize their fundamentals and will be able to fit into the demands of the band above moving their fingers really fast. The other issue with playing too quickly is we often lose the intended character of the fast etude. Things should be quick, yes, but the fast etude should also, generally speaking, have a dance-like quality or a lighter quality. Very rarely should it sound like you're working really hard. So if you're going so fast that it sounds like you're working really hard, or as some musicians say, sounding really athletic, you're probably going too fast. It's also going to cause you to miss details like dynamics, articulation patterns, accents, and other nuances that are in the music. So slow down just a little bit so that you can focus on all these other things that will then elevate the audition even more. For the slow etudes, they tend to be in a more difficult key. The one I was judging this weekend was in the key of D flat, which is not a fun key for anybody. But hey, if you've mastered your scales, not a big deal. The slow etude, to my opinion, should be another opportunity to rack up the points, because you don't have to worry about messing up a note in quite the same way as the fast etude because of like human error. We're going slow enough to be able to control the situation. So think of the slow etude as a chance to demonstrate your knowledge of, I already have all 12 keys in my fingers. I already have a beautiful sound, and I'm going to now just incorporate these into this slow etude, as opposed to focusing on the etude itself and then trying to bring those skills downward. It doesn't really work that way. The slow etude is a great opportunity to show your control in the lower register, especially if you're being made to play quietly, to show the full range of the dynamic spectrum, playing fortes really strongly and playing pianos really in a controlled manner. And if you have vibrato, it's a great time to use it. Anyway, I hope these tips give you some things to think about for next year. The auditions were all really good, but the problem is they all start to sound the same. If you do some of these tips and incorporate them into your audition next year, it's going to help you stand out from the pack and have an even greater chance of making Wind Symphony or Symphonic Band. I can't wait to hear you guys, and happy practicing!